Hello, world. It's great to be here again at the Story Arts Center at Centennial College, probably one of the most creative places in the country, I would say, and somewhere where my journey started many years ago. But I am happy to be here hosting the Creative Futures Virtual Career Fair presented by Applied Arts, and we have an amazing panel of guests, creative professionals, and just generally interesting people joining us today to share with us their journey, and hopefully that will help inform you on your journey. But this is certainly an exciting time to be working in the creative industry. I think the forces of technology, what's happening in the globalized world that we live in, and just being a time when ideas can breathe and live probably more easily than they have in the past with some new challenges kind of makes it a unique time, and I'm sure there's a lot to talk about with our panel. So let's meet our panel, and perhaps we'll start on the very far end. If you could introduce yourself to our guests and to the rest of us here, we'll start now.
I'm Pam Lau. I'm an independent photographer.
Hi, I'm Ella Callan. I'm an art director at John Street.
Hi, I'm Dave Watson. I'm the Executive Creative Director of Design at Mosaic.
I'm Maddie Rosenberg, and I'm a copywriter at John Street.
Well, thank you very much. And it's fantastic to have everybody here and to share sort of your insights and your experiences with our viewers at home or wherever you may be tuning in. So as I mentioned, this is a really fantastic time, in my opinion, to be working sort of in this type of world that we do. And as I mentioned, this all started for me at this location, and which is where I think some of the light bulbs went off in terms of what really made me want to pursue the creative path I have. But let's talk about you guys. When was there a moment, or when did you decide to explore a creative future? Maybe start over at the end.
So actually, I only started photography after school. I never thought that it was possible for me. Growing up, my parents are immigrated from Hong Kong to Canada when they're teenagers, met in Montreal. So for me growing up, the thing that I had to do was A, go to university, B, study something practical. And then when I was applying for school and I was applying for business and economics, and deep down I was actually feeling that it wasn't the right path for me. I saw on the listing the program called Arts Management at U of T. I didn't know what it was. It just had the word arts, so it was maybe creative, but it had the word management, so it was practical, or at least I could convince my parents that. And then I started freelancing when I was in school, and I came from there.
Okay. How about someone else here? When did you know, or when was that moment when you decided this was the path you want to follow, or did you not even have that chance to make a decision? You just found yourself in it?
I grew up in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I was a very average high school student, but I took a course called graphic design in high school. It was probably one of the first times the graphic design was offered at a high school level, and I fell in love, and I became from a very average student to a person who became very passionate about one thing. So romantically speaking, I don't know if I chose graphic design or graphic design chose me, and so I'm very thankful for that course, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
Well, I think we touched upon this earlier, and you can maybe fill in some of the gaps, but when you're having these kind of epiphanies or you found yourself on this path, how did your parents or your family or your support group kind of react to the fact that this is what you wanted to do? I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there in terms of, what it's like to work in the creative field. Can anyone share sort of what that was like? I mean, you did touch upon that.
Yeah, actually, when I was 11 years old, I taught myself to code, and I went to my dad because of obviously at age 11, he's like, okay, Pam, time to think about your future. And I said, Dad, I want to be a web designer. And then he was like, oh, that's nice, but that's not really a thing. How about law school? And little did he know that it's actually an extremely lucrative industry and in demand. But at the beginning, it obviously for my parents, they wanted, a future for me in which that I was able to secure and I was able to take care of myself. So at the beginning, my dad was like, okay, freelancing, freelance writers can have full-time jobs too and just write on the side. But over time, when I was able to kind of show and prove that I was, able to make a name for myself, my parents are proud of me now.
Good. Well, that's good to know. We're proud of you too. I think it's good. How about the rest of us here? Can you maybe share some of your stories?
Well, my family is in advertising.
Oh, so there you go.
I knew from like birth.
Right.
But I originally wanted to be an actress, and then in the 3rd grade, I was in the car with my mom, and I was like, acting's just not practical. I'm not going to make any. This is the 3rd grade.
Right.
I was like, I'm not going to make any money. And then my friend was in the car with me, and she's like, what about doing what your dad does? What about advertising? I was like, okay. And then since then,
There you are.
I've been set on copywriting.
So it's the reverse of what we're talking
Yeah.
about. You were actually the practical one, perhaps, in that scenario. And so you knew from an early age this is what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Did you consider any other paths, medicine or law, like everyone else probably on this panel maybe thought of at one time?
A little bit acting,
right.
but I was pretty, like I did my first internship in the 10th grade.
Right.
So I'm like an old advertising person.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, and it's amazing that, we're generationally, we're at a time when there are a lot of parents who work in the creative industry and their kids are growing up. So it's not that much of a shocker. But let's move over here. What was your story?
My story is actually quite similar to yours. So I'm from Sault Ste. Marie.
And I did focus mostly on visual arts in high school, so I fell in love with graphic design through that as well. But I didn't know advertising was a thing. I didn't have Mad Men growing up, so didn't know it was a job. So I wanted to do ESL, so English as a second language. So I went to university for English. And then I came to Toronto for a 4-day trip in the summertime. Went to a party and met an art director there who told me, hey, this is a job. You can actually make stuff for a living and like have fun and not teach English for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh, that is amazing. I would love to do that. So I did some research, found a school here and moved.
Wow.
And sold all your stuff.
My mom said I ran away, but she's happy.
Well, and it's funny because I think most of the most successful creative people I've met have multifaceted interests too, which I think is what makes them successful as a creative person, because they tend to be curious about the world. And I think that, knowing about other things kind of informs the work they do as a creative person, because I think if you were trying to define what we do, a lot of it is about maybe just translating our experiences into something else that is used for whatever purpose, whether it's in advertising or in something as an art project. But let's talk about where you went to school, because I think that's an important part of the journey. As I mentioned, I'm after university, I ended up here I'm a graduate of this fantastic place, and people are coming from different areas. But maybe you can share with us some of your, where did you go to school, and tell us a bit about that experience and how that transformed you, if it did, or maybe just sort of nudged you along a path that you're already on. Maybe you can start here.
Sure, yeah. I took the graphic design course at Sheridan College in Oakville, and quite frankly, it was the hardest 3 years of my life. It was intense. I had no idea.
Was it what you expected, or was it?
No, I thought I was going to go to a community art college and go to parties and
Sure.
just relax, and very quickly learned that it was absolutely not that. What it did for me, though, was it prepared me for the real world of design and advertising, and so I was very appreciative of that.
Do you think there's a general kind of misconception or a myth that needs to be fixed in terms of what that experience is like? Because I think that a lot of people who don't go through that sort of funnel probably have a view of it, as being what you just described as a lot of fun moments and creativity, but really, it's tough work, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think also the school, the graduates of the school are a reflection of the school themselves, and I don't know what it is like now, but then the teachers, the organization, the industry, they basically wanted to create the best of the best. And at the time, the best of the best in Sheridan was the animation program, and they got all the glory, but it wasn't for the lack of trying for graphic design and illustration, that's for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, great. How about over here? Tell us about your school, and what was that like? Where did you go to school?
So Maddie and I
I went to school together,
Okay.
actually. We went to Miami Ad School, Toronto.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was the first campus in Canada for Miami Ad School to open up. It started with just 3 students, another student named Runda with us. It's definitely a very interesting experience. So I took their art director program. It's 2 years. And for the first year, you're just in classes, but you usually start at 6 p.m., so it's very different. There's a lot to adjust to from university. And then during the second year, you're doing internships and classes. So it was a lot of work, but it was really awesome because we got to internship at Cassette. We went to DDB Berlin, and then we also got to do John Street, where we're currently working now.
Oh, exciting.
It was a really good experience.
So was that after a university experience or in place of? Like, how did you go directly from high school?
So after high school, I studied English at a Goma University
Right.
for 2 years until I went to that party in Toronto
Right.
and met that art director, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'd rather do that.
Right.
So then I moved to Toronto and went to Miami Ad School.
And what was the biggest difference between the two experiences? I mean, I know they're a lot different in many ways and probably a lot similar in certain ways, but just for people who haven't had either experience, what would you say was the biggest difference that you found between your university time, which I'm sure was great, and also this?
I think it's like the change in thinking. Like thinking and problem solving and advertising is very different than creative writing and writing an essay.
Right.
It was definitely a huge learning curve for me, learning to write a concept, an idea, and how things work kind of thing down, and figuring all that stuff out. And then also just the change of pace was huge. Like I came from Sault Ste. Marie, a smaller town, to the city was a bit of a culture shock. And then going from normal classes, like from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., but then having classes that were basically one-on-one with these amazing talented instructors from the business. It was just a huge change of pace and change of thinking, but it was overwhelming in the best way.
Do you think that freshness of approach had a lot to do with the time you'd already spent in university, or would you have had the same appreciation for it had you not gone to university? Would it have been the same
Yeah.
experience?
I think Miami Ad School typically
Doesn't accept you unless you've gone to university or college first, and had that taste of post-secondary. I feel like it was very important just for maturity-wise. Like I matured a lot in university, got that party out a little bit, you know? So when I went to Miami Ad School, I was really able to focus on my studies and really cultivate my creative path. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have anything to add to that, or can you verify anything that your colleague and friend has shared with us? Yeah.
I actually found that my university program and Miami Ad School were very, very similar. I wasn't expecting it, but I did theater in university, and a lot of the same types of things, like kind of working in groups, studying throughout the day by yourself, working on an extended project together, like
Right.
all that it was the same structure of work.
Right.
But in terms of the classes I took that weren't theater, you're exactly right. Like the one-on-one was really special about Miami Ad School.
Right. And there's a lot of people who would say that advertising is just theater anyway. So that's
Yeah.
actually a good foundation for it. But I
Yeah.
think, knowing what those differences are and how to sort of pull from all of your experiences to make them worthwhile for the next step is a skill that you would learn. How about over here? What was tell us about where you went to school again and sort of what that was like.
Yeah, I went to U of T for arts management.
So it was a co-op program, and one of my co-ops I worked at the Ministry of Tourism and Culture in the Arts Grants Department, and the other one was at a power plant, which is actually a very chill job in the corporate communications sector. But it taught me that, it wasn't just school wasn't enough. I needed to get a lot of real world experience as much as I could before I graduated. So I ended up sending a cold email and starting as an intern at Marketing Magazine, which was a publication owned by Rogers that reported on advertising, marketing, media industry, and that's how I started to build my contacts for freelancing.
So these are all very sort of interesting and very similar sort of paths. If you had to boil it down to sort of, the one big takeaway that you got from your education experience, apart from the tech skills, maybe it was the tech skills, but, if you could sort of give me a headline or something in terms of what the biggest thing was that you learned from that experience that's helped you, what would you say that is? Let's start with you. Why not? Yeah.
I would say understanding how people think.
And what does that mean to you? That's a very interesting insight.
I think a lot of it came from like the mixture of theater and advertising, just being able to understand how people perceive things and the signals that you give off to make people see it in that way. So it's a bit of like your interpersonal skills and interpersonal skills. So knowing yourself and knowing others.
It's a very, very insightful. I've in all my years, I've never heard it framed that way. That's very interesting. Sir?
I would say that the one major takeaway was the understanding of the power and responsibility of good design and what it can do. We interact as humans, we interact with design, both good and bad, all day, every day, and it wasn't until I was opened up in school to understand its importance and what it can fundamentally do to make our lives better and more emotive.
Very good. Thank you very much, and I agree.
Mine was, because it's a bit more personal, mine's always trust your gut. Stephen Jurasik taught us that on our first day, and it took me quite some time to figure out how to trust your gut and what that feels like. And
Can you, that's probably really sage advice. Can you maybe explain that a bit more to some of our people who are tuning in? Because I think it is really good advice.
Yeah. So it's like,
your I always thought of it this way, that your subconscious is a lot smarter than you are, and that's essentially what it means to trust your gut. You may look at something and you know, hey, I know that's better than that, but I don't know why. And your gut can actually be one of the best teachers. You can bring that to your creative director or your instructor and say, I think this one's better. What do you think? And a lot of the time, someone with more experience is able to tell you, oh, hey, this is better because of this and this. Like, your gut is right. So kind of using that as a tool to not go with things and to go with things. And as like a way to, I don't know, kind of guide yourself through the creative process is.
I'm sure it's a good life skill too, just to
Yeah.
sort of be able to know how to trust your instincts because they're coming from a lot of data, I suppose, that you're processing on a regular basis. Okay, very good. How about here? What would you say would be the biggest takeaway that you got from your experience?
I would say not be
Afraid to like express yourself and your point of view. I would say at the beginning, maybe I was trying to appeal, or I thought that my preconception of how photography industry was, or what clients wanted, I was trying to mold myself to it, or trying to show like all these different parts of work that I could do on my website to think that, oh, so I not turning anyone away. But I didn't realize it was kind of making me look unfocused, and knowing that, you know, being the soft skills that I thought in business were bad, such as, you know, being empathetic, being intuitive, like being able to understand and build relationships with people is what gave me an advantage, because I was able to build trust with clients over time. And it was like the relationships that mattered more than, you know, just the physical work.
And of course, you know, trust and relationship building is such a big part, not only of our sector, but of probably everything that we do in life. But I think more especially here, because again, you're dealing in an area where you're creating something out of someone else's problems that you're trying to solve, or a vision that they want to have. So, and you really don't know if a creative idea is going to land sometimes. I mean, we think we've got a good way forward, but knowing how to sort of have that relationship where you can have that mutual trust too, I guess, is very important as well. So this is actually a nice segue into sort of our next kind of line of questioning, which I think will be really helpful to folks. You know, I think for the most part, we're very lucky to be working in a place like Toronto. There's other fantastic cities, of course, in Canada that have equally probably great sort of environments and opportunities, you know, like across this amazing country. But right now, Toronto, you know, 4th largest city in North America, probably #1 global destination city in the world. We're right across, you know, the water from New York, which is a portal to the rest of the world market. You know, it's good times to be in Toronto, I would think. Probably very competitive times as well too. But you know, it's a nice place for us to be doing the kind of work that we do. So on that, maybe you can share with the audience and myself, you know, what a typical day, if such a thing exists, looks and feels like. Maybe you can just sort of describe what you did yesterday or last week, but let's start here, shall we?
My day is pretty chaotic. We have a team of about 45 designers, which is one of the largest teams in Canada, if not North America, and so it is a lot of managing and going to meetings. But also, my mandate is North American wide, so I'm on a plane quite a bit, and I have a lot of clients in New York and Chicago and Boston and Washington, D.C., so I travel quite a bit. The thing that makes me the happiest is when I get to be still involved in the work. That's the moment that stops happening, I'll probably start looking for a different career. I did not get into this business to do seating charts and people's reviews. I have to do that sometimes.
Sure, of course.
But for me, working on the work and molding it and taking our team and making them better is what I love to do.
And how do you think Toronto compares to these other cities that you travel, even just like in the United States?
From a economic standpoint, or the competition, or what all
Whatever
of
stands out, yeah. I mean, yeah. How are we faring?
I think that Canadian creative can stand up again. I mean, certainly from a population standpoint, when you take a look at the global award shows, now award shows aren't always the measure of a great work, but if you take a look at that as a litmus test for what we are doing very, very well comparatively speaking. But it's also nice to go up against the very, very best. There have been times where I work on a big client in commercial real estate, and as I walk down the halls, I can see presentation decks by Pentagram, by Design Army, by these JKR, these places that when I first got into the industry, I wanted to be part of. And now to know that I am considered their peer and going after the same business is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is incredible. And you know, you should be proud, you know, for your own work and also just to represent Canadians here. I think you're right. You know, we're sort of shining in areas of, you know, music and television. I think that, you know, that could be sort of broadened out into other areas that necessarily don't get the same kind of shine and respect that, say, film does.
I do think that we need to do a better job of promoting ourselves on the global scale. Sometimes we're a little bit too Canadian, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's good. Who else wants to share what a typical day is like if you can conceive of one?
Sure.
I'm a bit of an odd creative, I'd call myself, because I really like the morning time. So same with Maddie, we like to go to the office quite early, at like 8 a.m.
It's just us.
But typically there's a lot of meetings going on in our day. Sometimes too many to really sit down and do the creative work that needs to be done. So we have to like block our calendars off and really fight for those hours. But yeah, it's really nice at John Street. We're just constantly running from meeting to meeting, working with this team, working with that, constant collaboration. And it's just like a fun day running around. I recommend wearing running shoes if you're an art director because there's a lot of stairs you gotta climb. Yeah. Just, yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
I was just thinking that.
Literally and figuratively.
Do you feel that, you know, even though you're in an area that is, you know, about generating ideas and creative things and making connections in the universe that maybe other people don't for a project or a really great sort of creative concept or idea, does it require a lot of self-discipline? I mean, because you talk about having to balance, and you know, I think you talked about this too, sort of a very kind of administrative, you know, sort of world where you need to make sure that the clocks run on time and the trains get there and the bills are paid. Mm-hmm. And how do you balance those necessities with, you know, finding some time to actually come up with some inspired ideas that are going to make your clients happy?
Yeah.
How?
I'm a slave to my to-do list.
Right.
So I'm constantly making a to-do list on my computer so I never forget, because as an art director, I'm jumping from this client to that client, wearing many different hats, and it's easy to forget little things and let them fall through the cracks. But so that's why your to-do list is so important. And I think, yeah, as you said, it is a lot of discipline, just making that time to ensure that you have time for your creative development and make that work happen. And yeah.
Would you agree with that? Is that what it's, or how do you find that you're able to balance all these things in your job? Or is that a problem?
I think it's a constant work in progress. I think it's just evaluating about what is a priority or not. For me, as a freelancer owning your own business, I think a common misconception is people think, oh, you're a photographer, you're shooting all the time. But really, it's only maybe 10, 15% of my time. I find I'm in 3 different time zones. I'm in the past, I'm trying to wrap up projects, trying to get paid for work. In production for current work, but also at the same time working on leads, working on pitches, and what I want to do in the future.
That is very funny, because you are working in different time zones all the time in there. That's very interesting. Well, so let's actually, while we're on the subject, I know we've talked about it a bit before too, but this will be helpful if we can sort of just create a snapshot moment around this. But how you landed your first job. I know we've all kind of talked a bit about it, but and it's also a very exciting thing, and I think for a lot of us too, we land a lot of first jobs in our career because we're, you know, we sort of tend to have a particular trajectory that's maybe not a straight line, but sort of kind of veers off. But you know, tell us about that. How did you land your first job? I know you talked a bit about it. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Well, yeah. Okay, let's stick with that.
Yeah,
sure.
let's stick with that. So we did, I think Ella was mentioning, we did a couple internships in school, and then we ended up at John Street, and we were supposed to go somewhere else. We're like, we really like John Street, we really want to stay. So we just kept bothering Angus and booking meetings with him and being like, we want to stay, we want to stay, we want to stay. And I think it was partially our persistence, and we also took on a proactive project, which is just a project. We just decided to write some radio ads, and we presented them to Angus kind of as a surprise, who is our creative director. And one of them ended up winning like a bunch of awards and doing really well. So we were like, well, now he has to hire us.
Right. So you took a chance, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Extra work. We
Yeah,
just did a lot
yeah.
of extra work.
You applied some of the thinking that goes on in advertising to sort of
Yeah.
win the client over. In this case, your new boss. Okay,
Yeah.
very good. That's very exciting. How about your first job?
I was lucky enough, my first job was at the CBC as a graphic designer, and they reached out to Sheridan at the time looking for sort of the top students, and I was able to land that job, and that for me was very, very important because I knew that I was not moving back to Thunder Bay, and so I had zero safety net. So the fact that I was able to have a job the day after graduation was really special to me. Now, I thought I was going to go there and change the world, and I didn't know about the notion of paying one's dues, and so it wasn't the smoothest of first jobs. But I think to this day, I remember, and I tried to teach some of the young designers that paying your dues is a badge of honor.
And on that note, that's probably a common kind of inspiration sort of for a lot of people moving into an industry like this as well too. Do you find that you're able to keep that flame alive as you move forward in the reality of the world?
You have to. If you don't have passion for this industry, and I say the creative industry, you will be doing something else in a couple of years.
Right.
You have to. It's almost like the notion of would you do what you do for free if you were able to? And
Right.
if the answer is yes, then you have chosen the right career.
But
Good.
don't do it for free.
But don't
But
have to
don't,
do it
yeah,
for
that's
free,
right, that's right. So, as I mentioned, these are very interesting times, and, we'd have to talk about, the impact of technology, and that means different things to different people, because if you've been around for as long as I have, you've kind of seen, the before and after kind of time when, technology was a big driver. I remember, back when I was working on campaigns, and, the common sort of notion was that, websites were an afterthought for your campaign, and nobody really cared all that much, to when, of course, we know that it's beyond being the key driver to everything that you're going to do, but it does so much more than deliver a message. You're collecting data, you're sort of, building all sorts of, kind of intel that's going to inform all sorts of decisions, and it's interesting times. And then, of course, how can we, talk about this without talking about TikTok, which is something that not only my kids are all over, but also, Jagmeet Singh has, found a way to kind of really up his profile in the world of Canadian politics through his use of that. And of course, social media and politics are no strangers to each other, and a lot of people would say that, modern politics is about advertising these days. And perhaps some of you have sort of started in your careers at a time when technology was sort of, just part of the system and de rigueur. But what are your thoughts on how technology has changed just the creative business? Has it made it better? Has it made it more challenging? Is there a difference? Is it just a new palette to work with? Why don't we start over here? And do you interface with a lot of different, technology and emerging technology these days? And what's some interesting stuff that you're seeing?
Well, I guess there's two ways of looking at it.
There's one looking at it as a tool for graphic design and developing your creative, and then also as an advertising mechanism. But I guess for me, if I would like to choose to look at it more as a tool, I find Adobe Creative Cloud has been super helpful and has developed a lot over the years. Just from like using your phone, like Photoshop, and being able to capture different palettes and colors, and then using that in your design. And I think it's just really important to constantly keep up with the different tools that you have, and I'm sure the tools in the future are just going to get better and better as they develop. And yeah, I think it's a really great tool, and you should always be open-minded to using it, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, it's a tough question to answer, because I think someone referenced, Mad Men at the beginning of this thing, which was, in many ways kind of looked at, the birth of advertising, a creative professional industry that was sort of aligned with business, but also at the same time, it was the birth of television around that time too, which changed the game. We're sort of living at a time now when these things are happening quite regularly, and I think it's hard to even define what technology is, but my view is that it's the creative people who are going to probably define it and sort of use it in the best way. But so I mean, it's a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
But
I
over
think,
here,
I think that one of the biggest things it's done from my perspective is it made creatives a bit more generalists.
Because you have to be adapting to all the different formats, you know. We're talking about TikTok today. In 24 months, will we be? We'll be on to the next thing. And so therefore, the young creatives and also the creative leaders have to be relevant to understand how those technologies work to ensure that they are communicating and they are getting their message out there. It's funny, you mentioned Mad Men, which is an amazing show. And I watched it again, start to finish, about a year ago. And I'm telling you, the only difference between now and then is less drinking and technology.
Right.
Everything else is the same. Two people getting into a room, brainstorming ideas, presenting it to a client, whether it's cue cards or slide projector presentations, or using Zoom and presenting face to face over thousands of miles. That's the only thing that's changed.
yeah, very interesting. And I would concur. How would you? What's your relationship like with technology? Because you're working in a very specific field that has seen a lot of changes in the last little while, but how would you describe that?
I think in terms of getting noticed, I think that now it's very democratized. Maybe traditionally in photography, you would have to start at the bottom as an assistant and work your up. Hope maybe someday somebody wants to take a chance with you and sign them to their production house, and then you can start getting bigger client works. But for me, a lot of it was I was able to present my point of view from an early start because I had things like social media, Instagram, my website, and then I could reach a lot more people when traditionally maybe I'd have to go through, traditional avenues or send promo. I don't know if you still get lots of promo mailers from photographers. So think about other ways that you can stand out as an individual.
So you haven't really experienced technology as a barrier or a challenge. You've sort of been able to flow into it, or how would you describe that?
I mean, I think now, especially in photography, it's more easier than ever to gain the knowledge technically of how to learn how to think just through YouTube and what's out there. And then B, I think with Instagram and other things, there is an insurgence of people interested in visual content. So there is more competition, but at the same time, there is a constant need for visuals. So I think it's a push and pull. I think a lot of people, when books or literary publishing first came out, people were worried that it was taking people away because they're saying, oh, it's I don't quote me correctly on this, but they were saying it's like devil work. It's like taking you away from wanting to spend time with other people. And I'm sure television, people were kind of harped on set, say that it had bad negative effects. So I think to say that technology is a bad thing, of course there are bad things, but you just have to adapt with what's changing.
Who else wants to weigh in on the technology debate? I mean, are you seeing anything cool out there right now that you think, I know it's hard to predict, but is there anything that's getting you excited right now in terms of a new platform or a new piece of technology that's sort of sweeping across our world?
I was going to say probably voice is pretty cool right now.
Tell me about this.
There just seems to be a lot of interesting ideas coming out of it, and the interaction and some of the AI stuff people are doing and the possibilities there are cool. But I was going to say, I think at the end of the day, technology is only a medium, and a good idea is a good idea, and it can work across so many things, and technology is just the avenue to which you can get it out there.
Right.
But thinking of an idea and having an insight is still the same as it always was.
And some would argue maybe even more important today. I mean,
Yeah.
with the advent of AI and automation and machine learning, a lot of tasks that maybe took 2 or 3 people to do can be done very simply now. It's in an automated environment, but it's hard to recreate the creative process with that stuff. It's hard to outsource creativity. Some may say that we're probably living on the cusp of a creative revolution when a lot of the day-to-day tasks are being taken care of. Now, as humans, we have more time to do this kind of stuff, whether for work or for pleasure. But So everyone has a good comfort level with technology, it sounds like. What kinds of challenges have you faced along the way? Apart from the ones that we talked about, in terms of being inspired and sort of being able to make sure that you get paid for your work, which is obviously very important. But what do you think is the biggest challenge that maybe you're having now or that you've always had in your career? And how do you get around that? Who wants to start? Yeah, sure, why not?
Oh, you pointed at me.
I did. So you're not the challenge. I'm just saying that you may have a challenge that you want to share with us. Yeah.
I guess it's a
Challenge
challenge.
that's been around for many years. I think it's just taking care of yourself in this crazy industry and crazy world. I know when I first came out of school, I was just thrown into this really busy industry. And advertising now, as you said, technology does a lot of it for us. So it's need a new idea. I need a new idea. We have to do this, just produce that. Things are constantly coming and going from your desk. And I think a huge challenge is just taking 2 seconds to breathe and really take care of yourself. And remember, at the end of the day, it's advertising. You need to take care of yourself. Your brain is your machine. Make sure you get enough sleep and drink water. And you're not 17 anymore, and you're not invincible. So just taking time for yourself, I would say, is probably the biggest challenge.
Good advice.
I think, similar on your note, I think, being an independent and running a business, you're in two different, you have two different goals. You obviously need to maintain your current living situation, pay for yourself, make money, but at the same time, being push and pull between wanting to create or go in a certain direction or do a certain kind of work. So I think it's leveraging, especially for photography, you have to be always trying to push yourself, not just knowledge-wise, but creatively-wise to stand out. I don't think it reaches a certain point where you can just coast off what you did last. I think you just always have to keep pushing. So a lot of personal projects, a lot of creative projects.
Well, that's good. Yeah, sure.
I would say the two biggest challenges that I face today, number one would be the speed that we're moving doesn't allow for the level of craft that we once had. It's probably the thing that suffers the most in advertising and design now because of the timelines and the speed to market. Sorry for talking jargon, but that is so important to our clients that when we look back and we look globally at the kind of work, you can see that the craft is suffering, and I raise my hand as well as the craft could be better. So that is a challenge. And then number two is because of those same timelines and because of the level of what's at stake for our clients, it's very difficult to have a job where they create a culture where it's okay to fail. Failure in the creative, in anybody who has created, you fail 100 times before you get that one. And because we are forced to solve problems today, now, there is no longer the ability to fail. And that's why when you see vanilla work, it's because the bar for the acceptance of failure and doing something bold is pretty low right now.
I was just going to say, similar to what you said, I think with all the passion that people have for creativity, when you do something really well, you feel like the best in the world, like you're awesome, your self-esteem is way too high. And then when you fail and you do something that isn't quite right, even if it's like the most minor thing ever, like you just feel like so not what you were like. I think it's kind of like a whiplash.
Well, and that's probably, I would think something that's probably shared among all creative people. How do you, I know that when I was in journalism school, that was beaten out of me pretty quickly, that I got to a point where I was used to having my work critiqued and I was open to it, and it took a while to get there, and then it sort of just sets you up, and you have to remind yourself quite frequently that that's just part of the process. But how do you manage that? Like, how do you develop the proverbial sort of thick skin, or is it a mindset to be open to feedback? And you may not always agree with the feedback, because you may, how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure it's probably more so in this area than others, where you have to deal with constant critique around things that come out of your heart and soul that you want to sort of share with the world.
I would say being able to put stuff into perspective is a big one.
and
realize that this is just like a little
piece
of a greater puzzle that you couldn't really see yet.
Right. And do you practice that? Is that something that is easy to sort of, do you have to be pretty zen about the whole process, or do you have to remind yourself of that constantly?
It's practice. And also, like, in terms of criticism specifically, I would say that, like, each piece of criticism is just an opportunity to make it better, to do something better, so understanding that as well.
Right. Do you guys share the same opinion?
Yeah, I totally do. Our first day of school, our teacher said every time you get a piece of feedback back, say to your teacher, thank you for this. This is a great opportunity for me to learn and grow. Don't quote me on that, I butchered that, but you get the idea. They also taught us to kill our babies, you know. You have these ideas that...
Great analogy.
It's pretty brutal, but we've all been there. We have this idea that we're so in love with, and there's no way anyone's going to poke any holes into this, right? And then someone comes along who's smarter and better than you, and shows you, oh, you should do this, you should do that, or get rid of the whole thing entirely. And you just have to kind of like put your ego down and just learn and accept it. And it definitely, to Maddie's point, takes a lot of practice to fight your ego, I think.
At the same time, though, I think if you're getting really upset that your idea is being killed, it might be a sign that you don't have a lot of ideas.
Right.
And just remember that the more like there's always the well will always fill.
Totally.
There's always water.
You're a problem solver at the end of the day.
Right,
Just
right.
solve the problem. Keep going.
I remember a famous quote by Alex Bogusky from Crispin Porter in the States said that creatives need to trick themselves to ensure that they think that there is a tap that can always be turned on, and their creative water will always be there. And even if you don't believe it, you have to trick yourself to know that, okay, this idea died and I love this idea, but there will be another one.
Right. Very, very wise advice. I've worked with a number of engineers over my career, and for the most part, they seem to get this process, and they're always about working towards a sort of end goal and having an iterative process. And sometimes I find as creative types, we are attached to our ideas, and these are our babies. So it's always good to kind of remind ourselves of that. And I think this whole notion of sort of staying inspired, maybe we can sort of dive into that a little bit too, because it helps with that challenge that you're talking about, having a balanced sort of life, and sort of, what do you do on the side, apart from your creative work? Most creative people have different sort of paths where they're creative. Are you musicians? Are you photographers? Are you artists? Theater? I mean, tell me a bit about your life outside of work, or is there a division?
Who wants to handle this?
That's a big question. Sure.
I run and go to the gym.
Yep.
Which is a great stress reliever.
Yes.
And also singing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's a
That's very
very good
interesting.
singer.
Well,
my God.
I wish I'd known this.
Before the end of the show, can you?
I'll sing us out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's fantastic. This would never happen with a panel of lawyers, by the way, so that's fantastic. We should sing this out, so thank you very much.
I play drums in a band, cover band.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
I, as I told you, I took English in university, so I really like to write.
So I'm a bit of a writer, and I'm inspiring to be a child book author someday.
All right, very good.
So yes.
I did rock climb and boulder till I tore my ACL and MCL earlier this year. But I think it is really important. I think a lot of young people starting out, they're just like, oh, I'm not going to make pointy fingers, but for example, a lot of people I know who are like designers, I'm so obsessed with design and consume everything only about that, but they're realizing they're shutting out other parts of their personality, other interests that will help inform how they approach problems.
So if you could sort of dial back the clock a little bit to when you were in high school, or having that sort of, or at that age when you were thinking about these things, and if you could either give yourself some advice, or I'm sure I could give myself a ton of advice now, all the mistakes I've made along the path, but it's part of it. And I think the biggest piece of advice is to be okay with those mistakes. But what would you tell your sort of high school self, or anybody who's in high school now, if you could kind of zero in on some stuff that you could sort of share from your experiences? That would be helpful. Not to scare them off this, but yeah, sure.
I think succeeding in a creative industry is, I think we talked about discipline a bit before. I think creativity is all about discipline. It's being able to just sit down and you might not feel inspired, but you have to do this job and you have to get it done and you have to focus. And I think the amount of hard work that you put in is the amount of success you get out.
Very good. Yes.
I would say find your passion, whatever it is. I have a friend of mine who's a financial advisor, and he is the most passionate financial advisor I have ever.
Right.
He has pictures of him with his arm around Warren Buffett, and it was like for him the greatest, you know. But I understand the notion of him being really into what he does, and I just love meeting people who just love what they do. And so, if I was to say to a younger version of myself, I would say, find your passion and listen more, talk less.
Okay. Very good.
I guess if I had to talk to high school Ella, besides saying leave your hair alone, I would say, yeah, bad haircut. Anyways, I would say don't compare yourself so much to other people, especially in a creative business. Like, we all think differently, we all come up with different solutions to problems, and you can't look at someone and see what you don't have. You have to look at someone and see what you can learn from them. And I think it took me a long time going through university and college to really kind of figure that out. But I would say just be confident in yourself and consider everyone around you a teacher and you can learn something from them.
Well said.
This is very good. Yes.
I would say trust your intuition, because deep down inside you know what the right answer is. Sometimes I think about, like, you know, when I was applying for school, what if I had chosen based out of fear and chosen security and, you know, didn't become a photographer, how different my life would be. When at that point, it wasn't even fathomable that I could be doing what I could do now.
Right. Good. Well, that's excellent. I think at this stage, and I thank everyone so much for sharing all this stuff, we're going to turn to some questions from our audience. And if you permit me a moment to sort of see what we have lined up, we have a few here. So our first question is, you know, and I think we touched on some of this, but maybe this is a bit sort of deeper. So what do you do to challenge yourself artistically? I mean, and assuming that you consider yourself among the artists, which I think you should, but yeah, tell me a bit about that.
I always try to take on proactive projects when I can, and projects that are relevant to problems that we're facing in society. So Ella and I are working on a project now to do a sex ed. That's all I can say. But looking at the world around you, how could I impact single things here and there and make it better?
Right. Okay. Very good. How do you challenge yourself artistically?
Going back and doing the work. I don't get to do it very often, but I do it to, number one is to ensure that I still have the chops to do it, and also to show the young designers that Old Man Watson still has it. So those are two important things, because when they respect what you can actually do, then they will listen more.
And are you of the camp of, you know, sort of the best idea wins? So when you see new talent coming up, you know, how do you fold that into sort of your experience?
Totally. I mean, surround yourself with talented people.
And you yourself will look better because you're part of that team. And so it's absolutely, doesn't matter where the good idea comes from. I've seen, you know, I remember back when I was at Taxi, you know, the receptionist or the head IT would have an idea as they walked by our computers, and first you'd be like, yeah, and then you're like, actually, that's quite brilliant. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that creative people, it's the sacred and very soft underbelly of ego that plagues us as individuals, as creatives. That journey of ego for myself specifically is now at the point in my career where I get so much joy out of the process. That's what I love, is that it doesn't matter who gets the accolades or whatever. If we can together do something different and bold and solve our business problem for our clients and have some fun at it, greatest job ever.
Yeah. I guess for me, it's kind of going back to my comment on technology and trying to stay with the groove and what's going on with technology. Right now in my career, I'm realizing I lack a lot of technical design skills. I know I can see it in my head what I want to design, and as an art director, that's kind of my job, is to think of the visual and, you know, work with the team and kind of direct it towards that goal. But right now, I guess it's just kind of teaching myself how to use, you know, InDesign in the right way and Photoshop and like really get those technical design skills is kind of my challenge at the moment.
Okay.
I guess my challenge is, or how I challenge myself is, ways in which I can move the job or shift what an industry standard is. So for example, working in commercial imagery, sometimes I face some conflict because I am, you know, crafting or catering to a certain ideal of what a beauty standard is. So what I'll try to do, if I do a lot of casting for my jobs, I'll try to present a diverse set of subject matters and then try to push for that, because in the past, like I worked on a job and it actually got scrapped because nobody spoke up and realized that everyone was white. So yeah, and kind of pushing for that and saying, you know what, maybe it matters to represent people who are underrepresented.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, part of how we started this conversation about sort of, you know, sort of the greater picture with what we do. We can really move the needle culturally and socially, you know, in many ways as we do what we do, which you don't always have that opportunity. What about, is there someone out there that you admire quite a bit, like a single person who, you know, you inspires you, or sort of you think that their work kind of sets a bar, and who is that person? Maybe you can share it with some of our audience at home who are watching this, and they can check it out. I mean, from a design standpoint or a creative standpoint.
From a design standpoint, one of my favorite designers is
A partner at Pentagram called Michael Beirut. He did Hillary's logo, Love It or Hate It, and the identity system therein. He did Saks identity, and he's done a lot of stuff. Go to Pentagram and you can see all of his amazing work. And then from an advertising standpoint, there's so many. Dan Wyden from Wyden Kennedy, and these are getting old school, but David Droga from Droga 5, a legend, you know, Lee Clow, the list goes on, and because I live in the world where design and advertising becomes melded, I'm a fan of both sides of the fence.
Sure. I guess advertising is a place where business and creativity kind of breathe together, you know, quite nicely, and they can both sort of live harmoniously and, you know, change things, I would imagine.
Definitely. I mean, creativity will always be the thing that's going to sell products and sell ideas. It's never going to change. There may be a day where a machine can do my job, but until that day, I say, let's do it.
Yeah. I guess for me, not to rep John Street too much, but I love working with Mo Buffin. She is fantastic. And the reason why I want to bring her up is because right now in my career, like I said before, I'm learning a lot more design skills, and she's the head of design at John Street, and I get to work with her a lot, which is really fantastic. But Mo does this amazing thing with using our strategy team and design, and I never really thought in my days that design and strategy would ever work so well together. But I think you guys talked a bit on this on your panel on Miami Ad School, but having a solid strategy to go along with the design to really talk to an audience and know who you're talking to and how to visually represent that has been this amazing learning curve that I'm learning from her at John Street.
Okay, good. Are there photographers or other visual artists out there that you admire and you think you could share with some of the folks who are seeing this at home?
I would say, I think at the beginning when I was starting out, I was looking to form my own style, so I would look at a lot of photographers, but I would be wary of, you know, gleaning too much inspiration because subconsciously you realize you're copying. For me, I have a collective called Lunchroom Toronto. We formed like 3 or 4 years ago. Me and another photographer, Gabe Lee. We were just like realizing we're both freelancers, so why don't we work together? We ended up growing to a collective of like a bunch of other designers, illustrators, other creative types, and I think seeing what they're doing, seeing what just beyond actual like service-based creative work, how they're branching out and doing other things with their careers is inspiring to me.
Okay.
I was going to say, a lot of the people that you said, it's really inspiring to see such polished final products, you know, the stuff that wins all these shows. But even more so for me is the people in the creative department that we work with, like the creative directors for sure, but also just the people that beside us, seeing how they tackle certain problems that come in from clients, and like the process and how the idea gets developed and how it ends up at that final stage. That's like That's the thing that really inspires me.
Do you think there's some new work coming out of countries and cultures like China, India, Africa that are different from what we're doing here in North America? I mean, were you aware of any interesting campaigns or things out there that are kind of changing things a little bit?
I think Asia is really interesting right now. Starting to, even in China, Husband and Lum's photographer I follow in Taiwan, because they're kind of crafting another new generation of creative types. I think Canada tends to be very safe. We're kind of looking south of the border, and clients, I'm sure you guys can empathize. They only want to do what has been done before, and what they can see can be proven to be worked successfully, and maybe it's harder to push them to, take risks.
Yeah, well said. I think that because the average lifespan of a VP of marketing is about 18 to 24 months. They are very scared to be bold and to do different things, and I think we need more of those kinds of people, better clients that want to make bigger headway. And so I applaud when I see work done for the work that was done by John Street for No Frills. I applaud that because it's for a large organization that were probably many stakeholders, and they did something that was bold.
Do you, and that's such an interesting, again, these are very interesting times for our sort of collective kind of industry, which I think is blending into areas of technology and business. I mean, I think, these are sort of the days of, sort of creative intelligence, and I think we're just going to see that. So as we sort of, look at final thoughts and pieces of advice that you would give, again, to the audience at home, people who are still in high school, or maybe people who are deciding to transition into this from midway through another career or life. What would be your biggest piece of advice or final thoughts about this sort of world that we find ourselves in creatively?
I can start since
Yes,
you looked at me.
I did. Yes.
Not specifically advertising, but I think creativity in general can have a huge impact on the world and can change so many things. There's so many examples of good that creativity has done. So just looking for those opportunities and being aware of the power that creativity has.
Do you find that it helps to provide some meaning to sort of what you do and who you are?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially like if you're somebody who's doing it with a passion, for sure.
Good. Okay.
Work hard and be a sponge to different forms of creativity, whether it's cooking or wine tasting or theater or ballet, whatever it is. Being into other forms of creativity will make you a better creative.
I guess mine would be, don't take yourself too seriously, have fun, learn everything you can, play the drums, go to the gym, take pictures, do your thing, find creativity from all the different activities you do, and have fun. Don't forget to have fun. It is a fun thing at the end of the day.
Good.
I would say let go of any preconceived notions of how things are. There's only a certain way to do things. I think leave room for experimentation.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Even from where I'm sitting, this has been a really fantastic experience, just to kind of refresh myself in terms of, this being sort of the right path for me and for everyone here. And I want to, thank the panel on behalf of our viewers at home and Applied Arts. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you got a lot out of this, and hopefully you bump into these folks on the street or on your journey at some point. We've all shared this experience together. However, we were promised a song on the way out as we sign off.
No.
Or maybe not, but we can all sing together.
We can all sing together. The mic isn't set up for me to belt it out.
Okay. Well, I thank you all very much, and I think that wraps us up. So we'll see you again. Thanks for joining us.